pure business. Though I was a mere child, my stepfather put me and my brother at work in one of the furnaces. Often I began work as early as 4 o'clock in the morning. The first thing I ever learned in the way of book knowledge was while working in this salt furnace. Each salt packer had his barrels marked with a certain number. The number allotted to my stepfather was 18. At the close of the day's work, the boss of the packers would come around and put 18 on each of our barrels, and I soon learned to recognize that figure wherever I saw it, and after a while got to the point where I could make that figure, though I knew nothing about any other figures or letters. From the time that I can remember having any thoughts about anything, I recall that I had an intense longing to learn to read. I determined when quite a small child that if I
accomplished... So that's just a little bit of about when he was a young boy, when he was living in Malden. Okay, now he was not a slave in Malden, but in another part of Virginia. Okay, and his mother, his mother was a slave. Okay, he was a slave boy, and they used to pick tobacco. Okay, so they were on a tobacco farm. So, South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, they had tobacco farms and plantations. Okay, and a lot of those plantations are still around today. Okay, I don't know who owns them or what have you, but when we talk about reparations and the need to heal, to help heal what happened to our ancestors during slavery. We talk about reparations, and there's a lot of talk about that right now. If there's land available, plantation land, that land should be given. That land should be given to ADOS, okay? Because we have not received our reparations. So I just want to throw that out there, that is one thing for us to think about, for the organizers of the ADOS movement, for anybody who's working on reparations, that there is land out there that is still privately owned by the plantations and the people that benefited from slavery. Okay, so I don't understand why that has not been dealt with all these years. But, okay, so going on now, what was so great about Booker T. Washington was that Booker T. Washington was the first black man who was known for organizing black businesses. So we're talking at the Reconstruction period, which, just to let you know, if you go look up the Reconstruction period, it's probably going to be some time period up until 1877. And I think that goes more along the lines of like the land grants and stuff that were given to academic institutions and the Freedmen's Bureau and all that other stuff. However, I would put the Reconstruction period all the way up until like about 1925. Okay? So my OBS is kind of messing up because I see I'm getting a lot of still shots. But I'm going to go ahead and continue and not panic, and hopefully it's going to catch up. And obviously I probably need to download something to make it a lot better. But in any event, so now Booker T. Washington, as I said, he started what is known as the National Negro Business League. Now, that National Negro Business League now is now called the National Business League. And I have to tell you that I don't like the name change of it. Okay. It was recently in 2017. It kind of lost its vision over the years since, Booker T. Washington, he died in 1915. But over the years, in my opinion, it has kind of lost its vision and its focus. And like a lot of our institutions kind of lose track of their mission. And we see that a lot with our churches, okay? But two, we have a lot of associations that are older associations, and they're just not simply working for the black community anymore. Okay. And so here we have an institution, and I have to be a little critical because we have Bob Rewards Club. Bob stands for Black Owned Businesses. And I know that things can be done at a more cheaper cost. Things can be done at where there's more humbleness. There's not so much cliquish and grouping with organizations where they're not inclusive. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of these business organizations. And, people don't know where things are because of that reason. So in any event, I am getting the weirdest amount of ads that keep popping up. I'm sorry, you guys. Apologize for the breaking. But I want to show you guys the website for the National Business Association. So bear with me. Okay, so this is their website right here. Now, as I said, they just recently purchased it. It was the Michigan Black Chamber of Commerce. Okay, they recently purchased the National Negro Business League, which was what it was named when Booker T. Washington started it. It is now, as you can see, the National Business League. And all they have is a landing page right now. So since 2017, it still hasn't developed to where I guess they want it to be. I do have an article here that I want to read to you guys about the, make sure I still have it here. But this is an article that I did find by Afrotech. Okay. Google and the National Business League have announced a partnership. So they are doing some things that are not directly, in my opinion, you have to kind of question. Like I said, a lot of these organizations, in my opinion, have become so cliquish and not inclusive of everybody. And I think that is one reason why they're not able to capture everybody. They're so expensive, some of them, to join as well. So, where they're having like membership dues of $500 or more. I've even seen some of these organizations have up to $15,000 a year in the membership dues. And so if you're a small Black business owner, that's very difficult to be able to access to pay that amount. I know it is for me, myself, and the businesses that I've ran. It's very difficult for me to become a part of that if I cannot afford the dues and the fees every year. So that's my one criticism that I have about the current National Business League. Other than that, I did take a look at their website and their Facebook. But here's an article here. It says that and I don't think this is the article that I was looking at earlier. But I know that they want to go ahead and they want to focus on getting more chapters. They've got quite a few chapters, and I think it's somewhere about maybe 800 chapters across, but I don't know what they're doing. I mean, like I said, a lot of people are not familiar with the National Negro Business League today because it's changed its name, number one, and also because they're just not visible. It's like we don't see them or what they do. They might only have a few of them in a group there, a clique. And so, it's for them to kind of get out and also to lower their prices so that all Black businesses would want to be a part of the National Business League. Okay. Now, with that name, National Business League, it doesn't have any type of, we don't hear Black in it or whatever. Now, you might think, well, they probably didn't want to use the word Negro in there because it's outdated. However, I think it would have been okay to leave the Negro in there. We call ourselves Negroes back then, versus being Black today. I think that kind of shows the legacy of the institution itself. So I kind of question that the fact that they did change the name of it, because now it's kind of open where you're saying National Business League. Well, is this for Black people? Or, who is this for? Okay. And I think that's the problem that we have now in our society, where we're not seeing the benefits and things that we can have as a group of people because we are not labeling ourselves or things that we do as Black anymore. So we're not seeing the benefits that we could see as Black people. Okay. That's just my thought on that. And so in any event, what Booker T. Washington did, he was a very prominent figure back at his time because he was able to bring together, Black businesses. And he crossed over where a lot of his support were coming from a lot of those Jewish business owners and a lot of those people who were the slave masters. He wanted to build that bridge. And that's what we see in mainstream business now, is that, we want to cross over and we want to build that bridge. We don't want to just say that our products are for a specific group of people. Okay. However, depending on the type of business you have, and if you have a missionary organization that you're saying is for Black people, you should always put the word Black in there, or you should say that it's for Black. Because, like I said, when it comes down to funding and us getting any type of grants or anything like that, okay, we must specifically say Black. Okay, because as we can see, other groups have come in. And I'm going to show you some data a little bit in this, looking at some data of all the businesses there are, and in the United States, and how many are actually Black, okay, and how many are Asian or what have you. But as we know that we have been the people that have now negatively benefited from things that were supposed to be set aside for Black, and somehow they've all changed. And so we're not benefiting from this. But we did have a legacy, as you can see in the picture, and all over the United States. We had a legacy of having Black businesses in our communities. And as I said, they were not just subject to be in bigger cities, okay? They were in your small towns, okay? They were in your small cities as well, wherever Black people lived, because it was segregation. It was Jim Crow, okay? So there was segregation at that time, and you were not permitted to go to establishments where other white people were at. Now, since we're talking about segregation here, it's very important that you know that W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were rivals, okay? And W.E.D., all of these people back at that time, you have to look at them as being legendary for their time. But they all had their flaws, okay? So we know that W.E.B. Du Bois had flaws with his partaking with starting the NAACP, okay? And he had his flaws too. We know, so his criticism about Booker T. Washington was that Booker T. Washington, he was not for us. And he did speak openly about for us having voting rights at the time of suffrage down in the South. Okay, suffrage again refers to a person having the right to vote at that time. Okay, and so Booker T didn't care about that, and he did not care about us having integration. He was a segregationist himself. On the other hand, W.E.B. Du Bois, he was a integrationist, okay? And so it conflicted. And as we can see from statistics, there are arguments today where we have these discussions and we're talking about which one was better for Black people, segregation or integration, okay? Because, and as a lot of people say, is the only thing that integration brought us, because it didn't bring us any more economic wealth, as we can see, our wealth is still what it was around this same period of time during the Reconstruction period, okay? The wealth that we have in this country is the same as during the Reconstruction period. So it's very important that you guys kind of understand this period in history. It's very important that you know your history in Black business, because we once, as you know, we had these Black Wall Streets all over the United States. And that was during the segregation period. And that is how come Booker T. Washington, himself was so much more into segregation. Okay? So, okay. So I just kind of want to throw that out there in case you guys did not know. I know for a lot of young people, they do not learn the history of our Black prominent leaders all the time, and they really don't dig in. And when they do learn something, they just learn one like small facet about who they are. They don't dig down to what, the contributions and what they did. So as I was saying, the National Business League is National Negro Business League is what he established, okay? And that was in 1900 when that was established. The other thing that I kind of want to talk about is, as I was saying, if we look at the census, and I'm going to try to bring that up here. And I do want to show you guys currently the Michigan Black Chamber of Commerce. And I was kind of like we were talking, I was saying to you guys about how indeed, the focus and the cost of some of these organizations is that a lot of them, they charge too much. And it seems like they have lost their mission and their vision. And the reason why there's a need to have organizations for Black businesses, okay? And the need to be able to include everybody in that plan. And like with Bob, we only charge $25 a year. I'm trying to get this organization so that we can be strong and we can make a political statement. We can be part of, say, the ADOS movement and stuff like that, things that are important to our community, and not charge a large fee at doing so. This is not an organization where we're just saying it's for the boule, the Black boule. It's only for certain Black people. No, this is an organization that is for everybody. Okay, as I said, we have 3 types of memberships you can join. We have a consumer membership. It's $10. Anybody can join as long as you're 18 years old. Okay, it doesn't matter with ethnicity. Now, you don't get the benefits of a Bob or BFAC member, but you do get benefits. Okay, and that is discounts at all Black-owned businesses. You're going to get a discount, so we want you to take advantage of that. Okay, you can go to our website, bobrewards.club. So go take a look at all the benefits that we have. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have to have organizations that are not just for the Black boule when it comes to business. We have to be able to come together and be inclusive where it's everybody. It's everybody who can be a part to make this thing work. Okay? So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there just in case you kind of forgot. But like here, the example is their Facebook page. These are the people who bought the National Business League, okay? And the National Business League in fact, their page, this is their Facebook page. And they should have a much bigger following. Now, they're located and headquartered now in Detroit. Okay. And as we know, that Detroit has had its problems with politics for a very long time. So in any event, that's if you want to be a part of them, go take a look at that. I find it to be very interesting. And I'm glad that they did go ahead and take over the, I'm glad that they went ahead and took it over. Because and is trying to save it. Now, what they do with that is going to be questionable. But hopefully we can all partner with each other, and I am going to reach out to them as I do, and I'm partnering with a lot of other Black organizations to make it better, because it's about inclusiveness. It's about a time where we can all get together for a common good. Now, I want to go ahead and play a few more excerpts too from again the book Up from Slavery, which has a narrator of the book itself, and I want you to one thing I want to bring out here is how Booker T. Washington, as I was saying, he built he built bridges, okay? And he built bridges between a lot of your prominent white people back at that time, okay? And that means Sears Roebuck. He was a good friend to the Rockefellers. I mean, he even talked about at the end of his book him, being visiting and meeting the Queen Victoria. Okay, and then also, all the presidents at that time. So he was legendary because he just, he sucked it up, and I think him as a person, he wanted to learn. He was curious, even as a child. In the book, they talked about how his first time when he first started to learn to read, it was the slave owner's wife, okay, Miss Anne, okay, as you would call her. I can't remember what her real name was, but he was able to build trust. And and the slave master's wife, she started to trust Booker T as a child. Okay, this was during slavery, and so given that because slaves, they couldn't read back then. Okay, and so but a few of them, they slipped out and they learned how to read, and like Booker T said, he would collect books and stuff like that, and he was always curious, and he just wanted to learn, and so he was just taking it all in, and so. It seems like he was like that throughout his whole life. And he was so proud to be this black man that they chose to speak for the black people at that time. Okay. And so Booker T was, as I said, he was very legendary. So I urge you all to look a little bit more into if this is the kind of thing that interests you. Now, I would say that he was used a lot too. Okay, so if we think of our black people today who would act in the role of Booker T, a lot of them find themselves being a token and a tool for white supremacy, okay, where it doesn't benefit anything for the black community. I don't think it was like that at all at this time. That's what we see today. I don't see it like that at all, okay, because Booker T, at this time, it was all for black. He wanted to go back and he wanted to help his black community, and he wanted to make a change. He went back after he graduated from Hampton. Just to let you know, he walked. He did not have enough money to get when he went off at 16 years old to go to school at Hampton, Virginia. Okay, a lot of the schools too. Just to know, if you don't know, a lot of your HBCUs were started by Union generals. Okay, they were a lot of them were white. Okay, and they were once slave owners themselves. And a lot of your HBCUs, they would always and they would accept the mulattoes. So a lot of them were the children of slave masters themselves. Like Booker T. Washington himself, he was a mulatto. Okay, he never knew his father. His father was said to be off of a nearby plantation. Of course, his mother was African American, black. Okay, and was a slave. Okay, and his father was a white man from another plantation nearby in Virginia somewhere. Okay, so in any event, I think it's very important to explore the greatness of what Booker T. Washington that he offered our black community. Okay, and so as I said, I am going to play another excerpt.
1877 to 1878, I think may be called the Period of Reconstruction. This included the time that I spent as a student at Hampton and as a teacher in West Virginia. During the whole of the Reconstruction period, two ideas were constantly agitating the minds of the colored people, or at least the minds of a large part of the race. One of these was the craze for Greek and Latin learning, and the other was a desire to hold office. It could not have been expected that a people who had spent generations in slavery, and before that generations in the darkest heathenism, could at first form any proper conception of what an education meant. In every part of the South during the Reconstruction period, schools, both day and night, were filled to overflowing with people of all ages and conditions, some being as far along in age as 60 and 70 years. The ambition to secure an education was most praiseworthy and encouraging. The idea, however, was too prevalent that as soon as one secured a little education, in some unexplainable way he would be free from most of the hardships of the world, and at any rate could live without manual labor. There was a further feeling that a knowledge, however little, of the Greek and Latin languages would make one a very superior human being, something bordering almost on the supernatural. I remember that the first colored man whom I saw, who knew something about foreign languages, impressed me at that time as being a man of all others to be envied. Naturally, most of our people who received some little education became teachers or preachers.
Yes.
While among these two classes there were many capable, earnest, godly men and women,
teachers are
still
preachers.
A large proportion took up
That's
teaching
still today.
or preaching as an easy way to make a living. Many became teachers who could do little more than write their names. I remember there came into our neighborhood one of this class who was in search of a school to teach, and the question arose while he was there as to the shape of the earth and how he would teach the children concerning this subject. He explained his position in the matter by saying that he was prepared to teach that the earth was either flat or round, according to the preference of a majority of his patrons. The ministry was the profession that suffered most, and still suffers, though there has been great improvement, on account of not only ignorant, but in many cases immoral men who claimed that they were called to preach. In the earlier days of freedom, almost every colored man who learned to read would receive a call to preach within a few days after he began reading. At my home in West Virginia, the process of being called to the ministry was a very interesting one. Usually the call came when the individual was sitting in church. Without warning, the one called would fall upon the floor as if struck by a bullet, and would lie there for hours, speechless and motionless. Then the news would spread all over the neighborhood that this individual had received a call. If he were inclined to resist the summons,
and that's what happens today.
Made to fall a second or third time.
I love it.
In the end, he always yielded to the call. While I wanted an education badly, I confess that in my youth I had a fear that when I had learned to read and write well,
again, this is
I
a
would
narrator, narrator.
But for some reason, my call never came.
And this is the book
when
Up
we
from
had
Slavery.
The number of wholly ignorant men who
These are the writings
or
of
exhorted
Booker
to
T.
that
Washington
of those
himself.
who possess something of an education, it can be seen at a glance that the supply of ministers was large. In fact, some time ago I knew a certain church that had a total membership of about 200, and 18 of that number were ministers. But I repeat, in many communities in the South, the character of the ministry is being improved, and I believe that within the next 2 or 3 decades, a very large proportion of the unworthy ones will have disappeared. The calls to preach, I am glad to say, are not nearly so numerous now as they were formerly, and the calls to some industrial occupation are growing more numerous. The improvement that has taken place in the character of the teachers is even more marked than in the case of the ministers. During the whole of the Reconstruction period, our people throughout the South looked to the federal government for everything, very much as a child looks to its mother. This was not unnatural. The central government gave them freedom, and the whole nation had been enriched for more than 2 centuries by the